Hi, everybody. I think I'm live, waiting for my friends to show up. My name's Emily. I'm the founder and CEO of Seed&Spark, and I will be your moderator today as Anna Fetter cannot join us. She's going to care for some family. I want to start this panel by reminding you what we're doing here. So at South by Southwest, a group of us pre-recorded a series of talks to make up 90-minute film school. And all of us have had folks reach out after watching it to ask us questions. And so we thought it might be helpful to do a live session, which is the part we all, of course, really miss about South by, where you all can ask your questions and get them answered. So I'd like to start by acknowledging that I am on occupied Native territory. I am in Sacramento, California, which historically belonged to the Nisenan people, or Miwok, depending on where you are in the county. And I highly recommend you download nativeland.ca and find out whose land you are currently occupying and see how you can get involved. Without further ado, can we bring aboard my friends? Thank you. Hi. Welcome, welcome. There's Sav. Hi. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today, and I'm really excited to kick off. And I thought it might be fun for you to introduce yourselves, and also for those folks who maybe couldn't pay for a South by Southwest badge or haven't had a chance to see the talk and still benefit from this. So you took all of your world experience and you condensed it down to like 15 minutes for this talk. And now I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and condense what you talked about to like 30 to 45 seconds as an overview to set the stage for the questions that we'll answer today. And I'm going to make Naomi go first because she's incredible on her feet.
Well, we'll see. Hi, I'm Naomi McDougall-Jones. I am currently in beautiful Idaho, which is the traditional Mississauga native land. And I am a storyteller and change maker. And I was asked to give my presentation on distribution, which to make it last longer than 30 seconds in the current landscape, I decided to make it about audience building, which ended up being exactly the same talk basically that Emily gave. But the 30-second overview on independent film distribution is that it's completely screwed. It was completely screwed before COVID, and now COVID has gone, and now it's even more screwed. So the good news is that it's been a forest fire through the distribution landscape. And what happens after a forest fire is that there is an opportunity for new growth for the first time in a very long time. And so as an independent filmmaker, the only thing you should be focusing on with respect to distribution right now is audience building, because whatever the new landscape is going to be in the next 6 months and a year, if you have your audience, you can plug it into that distribution landscape.
I'm muted. Katie.
Hello, everyone. I'm Katie McCullough. I'm a founder and festival strategist of Festival Formula. Just a quick audio description. I'm a white female with half a shaved head, with the other half a messy mop of bright neon green hair. I'm wearing black rimmed glasses, and I'm wearing a geometric top, and I'm in a very messy office with a massive map of America on my wall. So to sum up, I had a brilliant conversation with Lida about filmmakers getting prepared for the festival circuit. From our perspective as festival strategists, to sum up, I would say that 2020 presented a lot of festivals with the opportunity to experiment, and also showed filmmakers and the rest of the film world that festivals can be extremely resilient in very topsy-turvy times, and that the festival is still strong. The festival world is still thriving, and it can be exceptionally beneficial still for filmmakers.
Thank you, Katie. That was actually a perfect synopsis. Sav.
Oh, no. All right. Hello. I'm honored to be in the great company of all of you today. I respect all of your work so much, and I'm lucky to get to collaborate with Leela. My name is Sav Rogers, pronouns he, him. I am a filmmaker, originally from Kansas City, back in Kansas City for the pandemic. and I'm also the executive director of the Transgender Film Center, a nonprofit that aims to connect trans-made films with audiences around the world. My talk was about none of that. It was about creating a personal documentary and the circumstances in which I made it. That documentary is called Chasing Amy, and I basically repeat the story of how we've been making Chasing Amy in every talk I ever do. So I'm happy to talk to anybody who missed the South by Southwest talk, because it's on the topic I know best myself, unfortunately. So thank you for the platform and getting to talk with all of you today.
I'm gonna recap Sav's talk slightly differently to say that it was about the search for a story you authentically can tell, and all the steps you took to figure out what that was, and when it happened, how it would look like the universe all of a sudden clicked into place to make that happen. But actually it was really about how you found the authentic story you needed to tell in that moment. So that was like, I thought that was really, and I'm sorry to like chime in and overwrite you, but it was like such an important, it made such an impression on me.
Well, I'm glad. And this is why you're the moderator and I'm the self-deprecating panelist.
And Leela, I know that you were one half of the amazing conversation with Katie, but can you talk a little bit about the work you're doing and any further commentary you'd like to add?
Sure. I'm Leela Meadow-Connor. I'm the Executive Director of Film Festival Alliance. So I work with Katie. We do a series called Filmmaker Lounge, which serves to educate and, create transparent communication between festivals and filmmakers. I'm coming to you from Wichita, Kansas, the traditional land of the Wichita and the Kansa. And I am an Eastern Indian woman with a mom bun, and I've tried to put some lip gloss on to make myself look presentable. My kids are home for spring break, so excuse any noise you hear in the background. Additionally, so everything Katie said pretty much sums up what we talked about in our talk, but I also just want to add that while festivals were able to quickly pivot to go online, there's a lot of talk within our organization about how we can better support filmmakers going forward. And to Naomi's point about disrupting and the system of distribution, throwing that out the window, and how festivals can play a bigger role in that is something we're definitely talking about. I'm also the CEO and founder of an organization called Mama Film. And through that organization, I am the co-producer for Sav's documentary. So I have the privilege of working with all of you in some capacity.
Thank you all so much. I can't believe how easily you tackled what I thought was like a really hard challenge to ask you to sum up those amazing talks in just a few seconds. That's sort of intimidating now as a moderator. Like, what am I here for? So the scope was really about end to end. How do you start thinking about getting a project made? What kind of project are you making? How do you then deliver it to audiences? And how do you even start to think about that process? And so we had some folks send questions in advance, and I think it's actually really important to tackle these because we are all pretty aware of the questions that we get asked most commonly. And so I want to tackle upfront the one that freaks everyone out the most, which is how on earth did you get your first film financed? Sav, do you want to start? Because the answer is not easily.
Yeah, it's never easy. And so when we talk about first films, I mean, for me, I've been making shorts for a long time, and those were almost entirely self-financed, or people volunteered their time or some variety of that. Unlike many of the people on this panel, I am not exceptionally gifted at crowdfunding. And so I always find it difficult to make that ask, but something that I found that I'm fairly okay at is raising money privately. I don't know what the difference is, but that is how we've been able to raise money primarily for Chasing Amy. It's just been right place, right time. And honestly, what I talk about in my portion of our panel is what the TED Talk did for me. And what it gave me was a no-name filmmaker, right? And I don't say that in a self-deprecating manner. I mean, like, nobody, if you would have to really Google me to figure out anything that I've done, right? And, I had some mentor meetings at South by Southwest, and they're like, oh, what have you worked on before? And my response is, nothing you've ever heard of, and which is true. But for Chasing Amy, having the TED Talk, TED loaned me their credibility to say, we're going to give you this platform to tell your story. And it wasn't like an intentional thing where they're like, here's our credibility, but that's what it ultimately gave, which made it a lot easier to go up to people who have money and want something to do with it or want to support somebody and say, hey, this is, my life's work is which is funny because I'm 26 and my life has hardly begun, but my life's work has really been wrapped up in this documentary. Would you like to support it? And so that's really how I was able to start raising money for Chasing Amy. And then once you get a little bit of money, then more people feel comfortable because it's like, oh, you know how to set up a bank account, you know how to set up, private equity for something, which is a team effort and definitely not just me. So that's been my experience. It's probably not the answer that people maybe want, that you give a TED Talk and people want to give you money, but really finding a way to deliver the essence of your story in a unique way has been extremely helpful for me. That's it.
Emily, I think you're muted.
Sav, no one's going to let you get away with the notion of right place, right time. There's no such thing. So it's interesting. I actually hadn't even at this point made the connection that Naomi and Sav, what you have in common, are really popular TED Talks that were explosive for both of you in very different ways. And we will put those links in the YouTube chat here in a moment. But Sav, talk a little bit more about what you mean by right place, right time, because I would characterize what you talked about as you worked your ass off to get to tell your story on a stage. You worked really hard to know exactly, like at the moment at which TED is saying, hey, what would you like to give a talk about? Most people are like, I'll get back to you, right? And you knew exactly what you wanted to say and you said it. And so how did that turn into right place, right time for private investment?
So how I found the TED residency, I'm not trying to give right place, right time answers. I will very much concede. I work very hard. And I think anybody can get lucky once. So it's best to be prepared for when those opportunities do arise. And so I've worked very hard when nobody was paying attention to the shorts that I was making, or I was just making friends along the way and nobody with funding capabilities were paying attention, I guess. Just to know as much as possible and to attain as much knowledge as possible. And so before the TED residency, which is the way that I was able to give my TED Talk, was I just researched the heck out of Chasing Amy for 15 years. I latched onto this movie, Chasing Amy. Kevin Smith made it. For 15 years, I researched it. I had to have a lot of debates and talks with people about, well, is this good LGBTQ representation? And I had to analyze, why do I care so much? So when I did apply to the TED residency and they were like, oh, your pitch to give a talk about LGBTQ representation in film is a bit vague. What would you give your talk tomorrow if it was about? I had an answer in which I was like, I have this documentary I want to make about Chasing Amy. And this is what this film did for me. And I talked about the very personal nature of how this movie saved my life. And they were like, that was the most narrow pitch for a TED Talk we've ever received. Let's do it. And really, I mean, so some things are right place, right time, but you have to be prepared for when the stars align, which is, I don't know, maybe it's my superpower because it's my answer for everything, is just be super prepared when somebody's going to maybe give you an opportunity to use your voice.
Leela, anything to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to something you mentioned originally about Sav's talk, Emily, which is that like authenticity and the authorship to tell the story. And I think when you watch the TED Talk and then you hear Sav talking about his film, yes, maybe you got connected to the right person at the right time, but when you have that connection to your story and you hear you talk, and I hear you talk about it, Sav, or investors hear you talk about it, you can, it's engrossing. And I think people want to be part of that. And I think that's, why people are interested in funding your story. It's because of this authenticity in your voice and the authorship. And so I think you should take some credit for that too.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to receive all the compliments. Appreciate it.
So Naomi, do you want to add on here, because you've had quite a bit of experience financing films at all levels, yourself becoming a film financier now. Just talk a little bit about your journey in understanding and getting into film financing.
Well, I came from absolutely zero information, which will be illustrated by my story of how I got my first feature film financed. And I did have a very successful TED Talk, but that was years after my first film. So when I was trying to finance my first film, like Sav, nobody knew who I was or anybody on my team. We were all like, none of us had even been to film school. We were all trained as actors. We had just decided that we were going to make this feature film. We had no credibility in any form, really, except that we really believed we could do this. So the first thing we did was we did a crowdfunding campaign for $10,000. Seed&Spark didn't exist yet. So we did it on Indiegogo. And we raised $10,000 because we thought we could make a feature film for $10,000. Which you can, but we couldn't make the feature film we wanted to for $10,000. That's how little we knew. And then we were like, oh my God, this is amazing. We just raised $10,000. We're going to go to investors and be like, hey, we just raised $10,000 from a group of people and nobody gave us more than $300. Like, that's how many people are excited about this film. And for the next year and a half, we could not raise another dime. We asked everybody we had ever met and several hundred people we had not met, and nobody would give us any money, because why would they? Because we had no credibility. And then we made a critical pivot, which is that we were making the mistake during that year and a half that almost all first-time filmmakers make, of like, we had a screenplay and we were like, we would like to make this movie when somebody gives us money. And a year and a half after that first crowdfunding campaign, we made the pivot to, we either have to make this movie or we're going to die. So we are shooting this movie starting in April. And if we have $10,000 at that point, that's what we're going to make it for. And what changed at that point was two things. One is our mindset changed, because we began then actually putting the pieces in place to make the movie, and it became real to us. And it became real to other people, because suddenly the conversation was, we have a screenplay. We would like to make it, and people give us money, which is like, everybody has that. We were like, we are shooting this film in April. Would you like to be part of it? And it becomes a completely different conversation, because people want to bet on a winning horse. It's not actually sexy to bet on somebody who like needs a lifeline. It's sexy to bet on people who are already winning.
Oh my God.
Nothing had actually changed, just what we were saying.
Naomi, you just made me understand my own story of my first feature film in a way that I had never understood it before, which is like, we couldn't raise any money either. And then we were like, look, there's this 1 month in June that we can all go shoot this movie. So that's when we're doing it. And then we did a crowdfunding campaign. And this was the precursor campaign to the invention of Seed&Spark, which is we built a wedding registry. And we weren't even asking people for money at that point. We were asking them for the stuff we now knew we needed, because we were on our way. And it didn't even occur to me until you just said this. 10 years I've been doing this and talking about my origin story, and you've made me understand it in a completely different way. We were going to go make the movie and we needed stuff. And people were like, I get stuff. Do I know what you're going to use my money? Like, if I write you a $5,000 check, do I know what's going to happen? No, but you need a location, and you need like cars to rent, and you need coffee every day and all night, right? It was not only our own mindset change, but the fact that at that moment, we had some inevitability of success, which is to say there was no chance they were going to write us a $5,000 check and we were not at least going to shoot the movie. Sorry, everybody. I'm having my own major aha moment over here it is about that sense of inevitability that I think there's a few folks in the chat who are like, okay, but how do you find investors? Like, I actually think it just starts to attract people. It's really easy to figure out who you need to get to if you know what you need specifically. Sav, what are you going to say?
In my case, it ended up being, I knew what I needed. I would talk to friends about it, and those friends happened to be a little more well-connected than I thought, or they were holding out on me for a long time. and that's, I swear, I mean, even just like being in the room with people who, my part in the TED residency, like getting to be in that room full of people who totally changed my perspective on what I could do when they saw that change happen within me, where it's like, oh, okay, so you're broadening your horizons a little bit, you're more open to this, and they could see, you know, like I really cared about it. And just like being in rooms with people like that who, you know, are really good in their field and are maybe older and a little more financially stable, that was enough for them to be like, okay, will you take a loan? Okay, do you want a private investment? Okay. And then it just started to like steamroll as more talent became attached to the film. And so again, it's not always right place, right time, but for me, it just ends up being like, if you can articulate what it is you need,
That's right.
and you're not necessarily asking, like,
Yep.
I have not asked for a single private investment on this film. What I have stated are my needs, and then either other people have reached out on my behalf, or they have just decided, oh, I like where this kid's head is at, I would like to be a part of this. But that takes a lot of practice, and in my case, 15 years of research on a very specific topic that nobody else wanted to be an expert on.
Which is most of Sav's lifetime, to be clear.
I'm 26. So my life's work is coming to an end, and hopefully I'll get to start a new life's work. That'll be fun.
Leela, give the people what they want. What is this dog's name?
Oh, this is Buddy Guy. Buddy. Okay.
Oh.
There you go.
I love him.
Oh, Buddy, we love you. So there's a great question for Naomi here. What was the point at which the investors started to jump in, and what did that look like for you?
Yeah, so we made this critical decision in September that we were going to shoot starting April 1st. And then we were like, okay, now it has to happen. And I think another piece of this is painting yourself into a corner that there's no way out of. My husband always says about me that like my main talent in life is painting myself into a corner where the only way out is to succeed. And so then there like is no option. So September, we make this decision. We have $10,000. October, November, December goes by. We still can't raise any money. We are asking absolutely everybody we've ever met and everybody we have never met to give us money. Finally, in December, the first investor takes pity on us and invests, I think, $2,000, just something. But it broke the ice. The first investment is always the hardest because investors want to see that other investors believe in you enough to put money. So that first person is always the hardest. And then we raised like, I think, $10,000 in very small investment amounts, but we cobbled it all together over the next couple of months. And then I think we had $20,000, but we needed $30,000 to get through production. And April 1st was a month away. So in this vein of painting ourselves into a corner that there's no way out of, we said, okay, the number one rule of crowdfunding is you don't run a crowdfunding campaign twice for the same movie, but we have no other option. And
that's not true, though. We'll talk about that later.
Okay, great. So that's what I thought at the time. And, but it had been a year since we ran the last one. And we were like, okay, well, we have no other option and we need $10,000. So we had 30 days before production began. And we launched a crowdfunding campaign for $10,000. No, for $20,000 this time. We needed $40,000 to get through production. And so we were in pre-production, signing contracts that we didn't have the money to fulfill. Not a great idea, but again, it worked. And we were in pre-production and running a crowdfunding campaign simultaneously. On the Monday, we found out that we got the money, the crowdfunding campaign closed, and we had one day off, and then we began production on Wednesday. It was the most stressful period of my entire life, but we had the $40,000 we needed to get through production. We got through production. Then we had footage. Then we had credibility because we could prove to people that we had made this amazing movie. We had footage. And then we were eventually able to raise, I think, $30,000 more for post-production and for festivals and distribution after that.
My story is very similar, which is we ran that last desperate crowdfunding campaign while we were doing pre-production. We had a little bit more time. We had 3 weeks more pre-production after we closed the crowdfunding campaign. And we also didn't run it on a platform, right? We made our own platform so that we could keep like taking donations as they came in and as it snowballed. And we were getting donations like through production because it was stuff. Like one day there's a scene, we're shooting in Maine. So there's a scene with lobster, and this guy shows up on set and drops off 25 live Maine lobsters in a box of seaweed. Is like, have fun, kids, and drives off. And we were like, this is amazing. I don't even know what to say. So yeah, it does start this sort of like community building snowball effect. I'm curious, Leela and Katie, so hearing these stories and thinking about how you interact with filmmakers, especially now filmmakers who are crowdfunding and community building in advance, what are the ways in which filmmakers can kind of take advantage of all this very kind of community building focused stuff that Naomi and Sav and I are talking about, and parlay it into a successful festival strategy?
Well, first of all, it's kind of, the thing that filmmakers need to remember is when they're going onto a festival circuit, they're going to hit an audience. They're going to find their audience. The benefit of having a crowdfunding campaign is you've already tapped into somebody who's interested in seeing the film. Now, understandably, a lot of them will be friends and family and kind of industry connections. But when you get that kind of momentum and you get people talking about the film because they're interested in the film, then it is your audience that you're speaking to. So for me, when I say to a filmmaker, when you go onto a festival circuit, the goal is to get your film seen. It's to bring your audience with you because they are your cheerleaders. So if you've got a crowdfunding community behind you and you get your first big selection, it's then the time to turn around to your, supporters and kind of say, look, shout from the rooftops. We've got the selection. Like, you love the film, you supported the film, shout about it. But at the same time, it is something that film festivals are interested in to a certain degree, because a lot of other filmmakers are wanting to try and raise funds to make their film. So it's like a continuous cycle of like, this is how I made my film. You're watching a film I made. Now I can tell you how I made it. Now you can go make your film. So it's like a perpetual, sharing and giving, which I think is perfect for the festival circuit, because why do we do it? We're doing it to share the film.
I would also add to that, totally agree with everything Katie said, but in this virtual world that we're living in right now, and we're seeing that like a lot of spring festivals are virtual festivals, and that going forward a lot of fall festivals maybe hopefully hybrid. They're hoping for that kind of scenario. But think about how, last year I think like some festivals started off with geo-blocking their films. This year that's not so much an issue anymore. So they're doing caps on ticket numbers instead of geo-blocking. So if you're showing virtually, think about how you might be able to tap into those audiences that you've built, through this outreach you've already done, who can watch your film at any of these festivals, which is really a nice side, effect of the virtual festival.
So this is super cool, because now we're seeing how I wanted to connect these two things before we kept talking about financing, because I know now that Naomi and Sav, with the experiences that you're in, and now in the position of distributing funds, I want to hear, so we can hear how we're rooting fundraising really around audience building, and also I've just learned painting ourselves into a certain corner and creating a total inevitability that a thing will get made. And now we're seeing totally new opportunities for audience building beyond just the four walls of cinemas in towns and cities all across the US and the world in the festival circuit, but now like a much more global audience. And there's a lot more interaction filmmakers can do with festivals, kind of bringing their audiences together. So Naomi and Sav, I'm curious now, in the position of funders, how are you looking at this? How are you looking at projects? How are you advising filmmakers?
Yeah, so after my successful TED Talk, the thing that enabled me to do is co-found the 51 Fund, which is a private equity fund to finance films by female filmmakers. So now I'm in addition to continuing to be a filmmaker, raising money for my own films, I'm also in the position of assessing films in consideration for financing with a team. And what's really important for filmmakers to understand, and a lot of them don't, is that there are only 3 ways that independent films ever get financed. Number 1 is somebody writes you a giant check and doesn't care if they make their money back or not. That generally only happens if that person is related to you, which then brings up very significant issues of privilege and also, most people, including myself, do not have family members who can do that. And so if you're waiting around for the person who's going to write you a giant check and doesn't care if they're going to make their money back, ask yourself, am I related to anybody who can do that? If so, go ask them and do that. And if not, give up on this option. Second option is exactly what Emily and Sav and I just described, like scrapping it together, insane, cobbling it together however you can, particularly for first feature films. That just is the reality. And the third option is a serious film financier like the 51 Fund finances your film. But the problem is that because of how screwed independent film distribution is, which we may talk about later, for the 51 Fund, we have to make our money back, at least on the majority of our films, because we are raising enormous sums of money from people who care about a return on investment. So we have to look very analytically at what films are going to make money. And because the distribution side is so messed up and so narrow in terms of what can actually make money, we can't finance most of your films. And the situations in which a first-time feature filmmaker would have the right set of circumstances that we could finance those films is like, it's an infinitesimal number of the people who approach us. And we want to, right? We want to support your films. We want to, but serious film financiers have to make their money back. And so the calculation is really different. So looking at those three options, chances are your only option for the first film is to scrap it together. And so you have to think about, how do you do that? How do you audience build? How do you crowdfund? How do you paint yourself into a corner? How do you create a project that you can make on the scale that making it in that way is possible and successful?
And maybe this is a fourth option, or maybe this is really part of the scrap option, but let's talk about grants, because Sav and Leela, I know you have a lot of experience on that front.
You go first.
I was just going to say, don't be afraid to apply for grants. There are a lot of grants out there. There seem to be a lot of grants for like development stage films. And I think that one of the things that, Sav and I run up against, because we're not necessarily in development on Chasing Amy, is finding those grants that are like mid-production, post-production. But if you're in development, look for grant opportunities. Creative Capital has a great list, and you probably all, as the filmmakers, know better lists than I do. But sign up for those emails, like look at every opportunity. You just never know. And even if you don't get the grant, it's a great way to like have everything that you need down on paper, from your budget to like your synopses to all of to your audience, to your demographics. And then you just have that information. A lot of times you can just copy and paste. So find somebody who is a grant writer and just have them write. Like a lot of them use the universal application, so you'll be able to copy and paste things. I do recommend do tailor things as needed, though. It's not always just a good idea to do a copy and paste job. And then also, if you're in the US, I'm sure in Europe it's different with the funding that you get from your countries. But here in the US, look at state funding and align yourself with a nonprofit like Sav. Mama Film is the fiscal sponsor for Sav's movie, so we've applied for regional and state funding through the NEA. So look at those kinds of opportunities as well. There may be beyond just the ones that you normally think about.
My view on grants is that they are probably not going to make up the majority of your budget unless it's a very small, tight budget short film, for the most part. If you can fund a significant part of your film with a grant, please send me the link to that grant and I will apply. But what we try to do at the Trans Film Center, which is a brand new nonprofit that we actually just got our 501c3 status approved, which is amazing. We just launched in November. We have a fund for trans-made films. It's called the Trailblazer Grant. We're about to give out our first one this year, and then we'll reopen later in the year. And essentially, it's a fund for trans filmmakers to apply to get funding for their work. Because in my experience, and in the experience of most of my friends who are independent filmmakers, the hardest thing to overcome is budget. And if you don't have the connections to private investors, like I didn't for a long time, if you don't have the connections to institutional funding, if you don't have and trans filmmakers especially have a difficult time getting to use their voice to tell their story, in particular. So we wanted to create some systemic change that would actually put money in the pockets of trans filmmakers. And we're going to continue expanding our programming. So please keep an eye out on what we're doing, but apply to grants. They will probably not make up the majority of your budgets unless it's a short film. However, it does, again, lend credibility to you if somebody is willing to put money in your pocket and say, hey, I support your film and we want to like partner with you. We want to do all these things. So please take advantage of that. Apply to as much as you can. Anybody feel free to send me an email or DM me or something. I'll link you to where I think are great places to start. And we're going to start having those resources on the Transgender Film Center website.
That's awesome. Thank you. I was going to say, you know, it occurs to me that, I mean, Anna very specifically curated this group of people because I think we collectively have kind of a point of view about what independent cinema is for, right? And that is about building bridges and building empathy and gathering communities and helping people understand each other across difference. And therefore, the way that we're going to work is somewhat different from just, I'm making an asset to make money off of, right? Which is how plenty of things in Hollywood that you will get fed in your streaming algorithms are made, right? They're just like, it's like most of Mark Wahlberg's canon. Sorry, not sorry, but that's the truth. And I'm not talking about like the big, like Christmas releases. I'm talking about like everything else in between. And so, or Liam Neeson, whoever's not going to offend you if I say that. Somebody will get mad. What I was going to say is I think it's interesting that a lot, like nobody here is like, you know what you're going to do? You're going to go out and buy yourself. You're going to take everything all the way to the finish line, because nobody has ever reached a massive audience with their film that way, ever. So I'm a big fan of saying, just do what you can control, right? No, Naomi, Sav, great examples of just not waiting around to be picked. Great examples of like, what do I have to do? What's the next thing I have to do? Okay, fine. I can't do that. Great. I'm going to go do this instead, right? You can just kind of keep moving it forward. And Sav, you've used this term several times, which is lending credibility. And I think that's interesting because we also think about that relationship when we build all kinds of, your first investor lends you some credibility. That first grant that you get, no matter how long, lends you credibility. The platform where you get to speak lends you credibility. Festivals lend you credibility, right? So I'm really interested to just hear a little bit more about partnership building, because that seems to be a really common theme. And Katie, I'd be curious just a little bit more on how are you seeing festivals really partner with filmmakers or vice versa? Or maybe the better question is like, how would you advise creators to better partner with festivals?
Katie, you can go first if you want.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I think the one thing that we always do say to filmmakers is that when you step onto a festival circuit, it's a two-way street. So you're selecting your festivals because you want to support those festivals. You want to hit their audiences. You want to educate, inspire, inform their audience that are there to be captivated. But at the same time, festivals are wanting to select your work because it fits their audience and they want to support you, which is why we are so focused on strategy. We're actually kind of focused on find where your audience is. Don't just submit everywhere and see what sticks. Figure out where your audience is. What are the niches of your film? What are the assets that can really, really be exploited for the benefit of you as a creator, but also the film? What I would say is that last year, going into this year, has highlighted how that communication and relationship between filmmaker and festival can always be strengthened. Because last year, there was a lot more communication coming from festivals because they were having to decide, are we going to pivot? Are we going to postpone? Are we going to have a hybrid? Which we've always been for as a company, that kind of strength of communication to always be kind of forever increasing and growing, because you can't have one without the other. Film festival doesn't exist without the filmmakers. The filmmakers don't have a fantastic platform to show their work without the festivals. I think what has progressed is the amount of realization of how they are dependent on each other this last year. So, when a filmmaker got a selection, they had the opportunity to promote the festival, which was screening their film. So it feeds into each other. But at the same time, a filmmaker suddenly had this experience of, oh, I can be part of a panel, or I can be part of a Q&A, whereas previously I wouldn't get that unless I was physically present at a festival. So I think the relationship that a filmmaker should always think about a festival is that they are there to help you promote yourself, but also you can help each other. And I think that one of the things that we're really keen on is that to kind of encourage filmmakers that when they do get those selections, because sometimes it's a long time till you get one. And sometimes they are very spaced out and you can be going months with just hearing no. That when you hear that yes, you yell it from the rooftops, you shout about it, because the one thing that I can tell you, and a lot of filmmakers don't realize this because they presume that film festivals have a lot of money, is that festivals appreciate being acknowledged just as much as you appreciate being selected. So, social platforms right now are so key in everyone's life. Even if you're not on all of them, you're on one of them at some point. Tag those festivals, because the festivals want to do that in return and they want to increase their audience, especially when we have kind of, organizations that are really squashing the algorithm and having to force you to kind of pay, whereas organic reach is the best reach because it's more meaningful. So I do think that the relationship between any filmmaker and festival should be absolutely key and not dismissed as disposable, because it's something to build on, especially if you're a short filmmaker who's returning to a festival that screens features and you make your first feature. Like, there's a relationship there for you to tap into. It's not a cut and dry. It's not like, great, you screen my film, see ya. It's like, you screen my film and I really appreciate the opportunity you gave me. I've made something new. Let's have a chat. Let's kind of see if my audience is still there. So filmmakers and festivals can definitely kind of strengthen that collectively, I think.
Retweet, all that. I agree wholeheartedly. Said it far more eloquently than I could have. I'm in that position now, though. I'm proof that what Katie is saying works. I owe my entire career, most of my friends, my broader network, if you want to call it that, to film festivals. I know I've met 3 out of the 4 of you in person on this panel, or other people on this panel other than me, because of film festivals, which is great. It's a total privilege to get to meet great people like that. But like Leela and I are super close friends because she started a film festival and I just attended one year, like that is how we ended up working together. It's a community-based thing. And everything that I do, whether it's through the Trans Film Center or as an independent filmmaker or anything else I do, is the whole reason to do it is community. And that's the best thing about independent film, is getting to work so closely with people that you care about. And so the festival side of things is ridiculously important to me. And so it's been really nice to see festivals be able to pivot during this time. But I feel like there's a question, Emily, that you were asking that is eluding me at the moment.
Well, so first of all, something Katie said scratched a memory for me, which is I remember talking to a distributor who said he bought a film in a room when the creators produced a spreadsheet that was all of the audience building partnerships and festival relationships and press relationships that they had built up until the point of making that feature, and also around that film from crowdfunding campaigns and a really great festival circuit with their previous film. And for the distributor was like, oh, that's all the work I would have had to do. So already you're walking in having saved me a bunch of money. Now, let me say, if you're building this, that is an asset that you can monetize, because when you walk into a distributor, know that you are saving them cash, and that should increase the amount for which they buy your film, right? But it makes it easy for them to say, there's an audience here for this. If there's not already an audience, this creator knows exactly where to go back to meet the audiences who are most excited to see them. We know that we can seed the organic network effect, because like organic only comes from actually you getting a bunch of partners to promote on your behalf. Like organic is also not, organic is manufactured. Like, yes, something can take off now and again, but generally speaking, it has been seeded very carefully through a network of partners that you have cultivated over time. So you can create the organic network effect, but it's something that you actually have to build over time. Anyway, I was just excited because Katie reminded me of this distributor, a big distribution company, global distribution company, buying a film that probably wasn't on everyone's radar, but because they knew they would be able to really reach audiences and build something meaningful out of it. And that's really the thing. It's sort of like you don't get an agent till you're already making money, and you don't get a distributor until you can guarantee them a win. That's so that's the piece of it. And then the question is, once you've built all that, how much do you want to cut the distributor in for? Naomi.
Well, I was just going to give some hard evidence for what Emily is saying, which is that with my second feature film, Bite Me, we finished the film and we went to distributors with it initially. And everybody said, oh my God, we love the film so much. We have no idea how to sell it, market it. Sorry. And we were like, it's a romantic comedy about vampires. Are you insane? Of course. Like, how do you not know how to market this film? So we, in partnership with Seed&Spark, rented an RV, and we organized ourselves a 51 screening, 40 city, 3-month joyful vampire tour of America. We spent all of the summer of 2019 building this audience, doing all of the work, collecting data. We ran Facebook ads. By the end of that tour, not only did we have this huge built audience, but we could say, these are exactly the people who like the film. Here's where they are. Here are pictures of them in vampire costumes at the screenings. And we put all this information together, and we went back to the distributors, and we had 6 offers within 2 weeks. Because when they said, well, we don't know who this film is for, we said, here are receipts. Like, what are you talking about? And then they were like, oh, okay, you did all the work. Fine.
Yeah, I think there is this notion that you're going to get picked, and the sort of the folks are going to do all the work for you. And I would say festivals are something of a anomaly in that they have been in a place building audiences for a really long time, and especially in this virtual environment, filmmakers themselves can bring so much to the table, probably even more so than they could before. Because my festival strategy was to always go to places that I didn't know anybody, because that was going to be super valuable to me. And then I would show up and like do whatever glad handing and promoting that I could in the town once I got there. But I think it's really, it's important to realize that like their distributors and agents are not interested in you until they know they can make money. And they don't care if you make money. Just want to be really clear about that. They need to know that they can make money, and they don't care if you make money. And so the more that you can deliver something directly to your audience, the more opportunity you have to actually make money off of the thing that you have spent, or that you call your life's work, right? In this case. I want to make sure that we don't get ahead of ourselves, because there's so much more. Leela, I want you to jump in here more on the festivals front.
Yeah, I was just going to add that I have a micro cinema, and Bite Me was stopped in at our place, and that was so fantastic. And if you haven't watched Naomi's series about the journey of this and all the data she collected, you've got to watch it. It's a must watch. I'll also add that, I really do hope that, like to Sav's point about networking and festivals, like, yes, there's ways to connect online, but there's absolutely nothing like that in-person bonding connection that you make. So I'm really hopeful that we return to that eventually. To Katie's point, we're talking about different festivals and your strategy, and make sure that when you're doing your research about festivals, like there are good festivals and there are bad festivals. And we've heard about all the bad festivals. We hear about them. The top rated festivals on Film Freeway, they're not all the good festivals. Like there are red flags you should look out for. What does it mean when you're like a finalist, or you have to pay your own ticket to an award ceremony? That's not a good festival. Film Festival Alliance is made up of mission-driven festivals, and if you are interested, you can take a look at our website and look at some of those festivals that are like really doing the work about, they're independent, they are community and filmmaker driven, and we're really trying to do the work to strengthen that sector of the film festival industry. I also just want to add that one of the things that we're really talking about internally as an organization and within our membership is this idea of supporting filmmakers and how we can give back to filmmakers and make it an equitable and balanced relationship. Be that, because festivals saved money maybe on hospitality this year, some were able to rev share with their filmmakers. If you can't get them to rev share, ask them about collecting data and exactly what Naomi and Emily were talking about, like what email lists might they be able to give you, what data might they be able to give you from their virtual fest, and then going forward, how does that translate back into the physical world? How can festivals, do more work to support filmmakers in that vein? So that's something that's on the mind of our festivals. So I just wanted to put that out there because I also just want to say, like, don't be afraid to ask questions. And don't be afraid to communicate with the festivals, because we're all trying to work towards something new together. As Naomi said, we're on the verge of like a precipice of something big changing, and we all want to work together towards that goal.
Say more about this. We're on the precipice of something big changing. You can't, we have 30 more minutes here, so we're not going to be able to just be like, and scene. I want to unpack this because I think it's really important that we really start to put language around what we mean by this specifically, how it can help, how it can hurt, what is everyone's contribution. Because I, for one, do not want to be sitting on the sidelines for this big change. I don't want any filmmaker to feel like this is happening to them. I think we have an opportunity to make sure that this change happens with all of us. And I mean all of us. And so I would love to start to hear from you all about the changes that you're seeing from end to end, and how you're thinking about the future, and what people can do, how they can get involved.
Can I take a whack at setting the stage for the opportunity?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to try to make this as short as possible. Because of global marketplace changes, the studios that happened when DVD sales fell out and streaming began, the studios can now only afford to make films for global audiences. They're making $1 billion per film, but they can only make films they can sell to every audience on the planet in the world, which has massively reduced the number of films they can make and limited the kinds of films they can make. This is how we get the Emoji Movie, right? They don't even have to, the films have gotten worse because they have to appeal to everyone, which is not how great films get made. Meanwhile, Netflix has captured everybody else and some of the other streaming platforms, but let's be real, it's mostly Netflix. And they have trained audiences to expect unlimited great content or okay content for free. This is a catastrophe. And it feels like free to audiences because it's just the $12.99 coming off their credit card every month. This is a catastrophe because what that has trained audiences is that to pay even $2.99 to rent a specific movie feels like too much. They get annoyed, right? They're like, oh my God, it's not, I'll just wait till it's on Netflix, right? We hear that from people all the time. The reason this is a catastrophe is that Netflix is a non-democratic revenue stream because Netflix just says, if you're lucky, we would like to license your film for $10,000 for the next 2 years. And you can say yes, you can say no, you can try to negotiate, but you're an independent filmmaker, so you can't really negotiate. You can either say yes or no. Let's say you say yes. You get your $10,000. Your film could then become the biggest thing that Netflix has ever had. More people could watch it than ever. You still only have your $10,000. And worse, they're not even going to tell you that your thing is the biggest thing on Netflix because all of their data is hidden. So in 2 years, they're going to come back to you and they'd say that we'd like to license your movie for $10,000 for the next 2 years. You can say yes, you can say no, but you have no data and no evidence to battle back against them. And in capturing audience, they have removed almost all of the democratic revenue streams from the industry, meaning revenue streams where the number of people who watch your movie is in direct proportion to the amount of money you make. Those don't exist anymore, almost at all. That's a problem because then independent film isn't independent film. The thing that used to happen of audiences discovering a film and loving it and making it a big success is virtually impossible right now. So that's the context for what has to change. But filmmakers are unhappy and audiences are actually also unhappy because although they have Netflix and they grumble about paying for something else, they don't really like what Netflix is serving them most of the time either. So that's where the opportunity is. But it's going to require radical thinking because it's not just like, oh, we forgot to think about the DVD. Like we have to completely change how we think about financing, producing, and distributing films and how audiences want to watch films and what the value proposition of independent film is. I'm going to do a quick plug for an incubator that Liz Manishill and Abini Bloodworth and Angela Harmon and I are starting and running this summer. So we're running an 8-week incubator for up to 36 filmmaking teams to literally redesign, to apply design thinking and go through an 8-week process to redesign financing, production, and distribution for independent film. And applications are open for that on Film Freeway if you want to come be part of that design process.
Yeah, I want to add a couple of details there because I think that's really important context to set. A couple of things have happened during the pandemic, for example, like the Paramount consent decrees were repealed. That was the original, that refers to the laws that went into place during the original trust busting. So back in the 20s, when they realized that the studios were monopolies that could effectively own artists and all of their output with no democratic revenue streams, meaning how many people watched their movies was not representative of how much money they were getting paid. And the studio could completely set the price for things and decide how much tickets cost. And does this sound familiar to anyone? Because it's exactly how Netflix operates. Let's not leave them alone. Like all of these monopoly streamers are part of this, and Netflix, good, bad, and ugly has become the sort of proxy for all of this, right? I think the audience piece of this that's really important is that the vast majority of what people are watching is on streaming platforms, and the vast majority of how that is delivered to them is through algorithms. And algorithms are not built, you might be shocked, to benefit storytellers and their audiences, but to benefit platforms and advertisers. As a result, I just noticed my dad's listening. Hi, Dad. That's so nice. Joining us from Maine, an island off the coast of Maine, actually. How we actually reach our audiences has been fundamentally intermediated in challenging ways. And I would argue this is why it's more important than ever that we focus on the relationship between, for example, filmmakers and festivals, because festivals are curators. They're the anti-algorithm. They are the people who know their community and they have a taste for cinema. And they bring those two things together and create serendipity and opportunities we haven't seen before. We also have to think about all the ways in which the work that Naomi described for building audiences and getting out there in the universe, the work that Sav described for creating opportunities for like serendipity and meeting people, the way that we built for our first film a community around our feature just by asking for stuff. All of those are ways to disrupt an algorithmic delivery of a film. You have to be able to reach people who don't look like you and don't think like you if you want your film to have an impact. So that's the thing that we're focused on now at Seed&Spark. The reason we shuttered our streaming service is because we didn't think a streaming service was going to contribute to this problem set the way that we really wanted to. And we built a platform that delivers films into corporations for corporate training purposes. And that's because corporations collect people that no algorithm would ever select. And it allows us to get films in front of people who would never otherwise see them, both shorts and features. And I know that this is the direction that we're going to take the rest of this conversation, because this is where I really feel like we have an opportunity to help people see themselves a part of this overall disruption.
I just wanted to jump in real quick and say to Naomi's point about how everything has to be for a global audience. This is where my work really comes into play, because I primarily make films about queer and trans people, because those are the people that I know and that I love. I also run a nonprofit dedicated to helping trans-made films get connected with global audiences. The challenge is that there's a whole map of places that LGBTQ films cannot be shown because of respective countries' laws effectively demonizing LGBTQ people. And so when that's your solution, that a film has to go everywhere and has to be for everybody, well, it ends up being for nobody. And, there are about 32, a conservative estimate of how many LGBTQ people there are in the United States alone is 32 million people, which means that in their collective buying power, according to like a 2016 Forbes estimation, was $3.7 trillion. So that's $3.7 trillion that people are missing out on because they have to make films for this global audience that end up being for no one. So that is the frustrating part for specifically my community. And if you want to support some of that, let me know and I'll tell you how.
And I do want to say that I think the fact that the studio system has gone on this path of, as you perfectly say, making films for everyone that are for no one, which I don't know, is falling apart on them as we speak. But I think that creates an opportunity for independent films to appeal to very niche audiences. And I do think that that is part of what this innovation is going to be. Because to make your money back on an independent film, you don't need everybody. You need a specific group of people who will be so excited that you've made a film for them, about them, appealing to them, that they will come out and they will spend money and they will maybe put on a vampire outfit or whatever they will do to be part of your film.
I'll settle for 1 trillion. I'll settle for 1 trillion from the gays.
Great.
I wanted to say something about where I think filmmakers and festivals can actually kind of talking about earlier about kind of building that relationship and engaging in a stronger community. But I actually think it does come down to the art of curation. Like, a selection at a festival is a curated stamp of approval from a festival kind of saying, we champion this filmmaker or we want to share this story. And I think the one thing that we've seen with the shakeup of the pandemic is that we've seen festivals fall by the wayside because maybe they were not the greatest organized festivals. Maybe they weren't doing it for the right reasons. As Leela said, there are good festivals, there are bad festivals. But I think the one thing that I am hoping it will shake some dust off some of the old-fashioned traditional festivals that are those kind of tastemaker festivals that every filmmaker gets duped into submitting to because they feel they're not a filmmaker unless they get that laurel, unless they get that nomination there. And I think it's sad when you look to festivals and you see 2 weeks later, all the features that they select are on a VOD or they're in a theatrical run. And I think what I would hope and what I have seen since kind of the pandemic shaking things out, and I'm talking about features here, not necessarily shorts, is that festivals are suddenly having to look outside of the studios and look to the proper independent films, which gives a stronger voice and a stronger opportunity, because a lot of these festivals started to give a platform for independent films, to give platform to filmmakers that maybe are on their first or their second feature, that, they don't have a big, massive budget. They don't have a cast to, support them and get that traction. And I have seen a shift in that. And I do think it's because a lot of festivals suddenly went, oh, crap, we don't have the big films that we normally get. We need to fill in those slots. Let's look to somewhere else. But what they found was some amazing content and stuff that they took a chance on. I hope that carries on, that we're not constantly going, oh, it's the latest film from that very well-known director that, we see a film from all the time, and they're actually, we are kind of looking grassroots, because as Leela will attest, and as I'm always banging on about, there are lots of film festivals out there, and they're not always the big ones that you need to aim for. Your audience is universal. Your audience will not always be at those very big, prolific tastemaker festivals. You may get a massive audience at the regional festivals that will support you more than a bigger feature festival would. I'm not bad-mouthing kind of like, big festivals. They can give you brilliant opportunities, but I think we have to remember the festival circuit is competitive. We have so many film festivals that exist now. We have so many submissions coming through the door. You don't know what your competition is. All you get is a yes or a no. And the chances are you're going to get a lot of no's. That's just the way the circuit is. But if you can kind of look outside of going the traditional method, that you're not just grabbing the kind of, the big gun festivals and actually look further afield, you'll find more fruitful connections there. So I do think it comes down to filmmakers doing more research and not just doing the shorthand of, oh, I'm not a filmmaker unless I submit here. But then also for festivals to kind of go, how much of my content am I selecting from open submissions and how much of it is pre-curated? There are some brilliant festivals who are very open and transparent about that. Brilliant, because it gives a filmmaker a better understanding of, okay, I have a chance here. Or actually, I don't have a chance here because I know they just go to, all the big festivals and kind of grab them from there. I do think it's a two-way street in terms of making it better, but also building on what is already there and making it stronger.
Leela, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, basically everything that Katie said. I was just going to reiterate like the value of the regional festivals and how loyal their audiences are. They're community driven, and they have spent years and years and years cultivating these audiences. And these audiences look to them to be the curator, as Katie said, and the tastemaker. Mm-hmm. And I think that, people are sick of, because of like last year, I mean, I could barely take time to watch anything at South by because I just had so much else going on. And like, I am tired of watching things online and doing things online, and I just give me a good podcast, that's where I am right now. But like, I think that, again, back to that algorithm thing, what is the algorithm recommending to you that is like, what percentage of that is good content? And so I think somebody mentioned in the chat, will this continue? Yes, I do think that independent film festivals and regional film festivals will go back to being very, very independent film driven and like places of discovery for new filmmakers. I really hope so.
I think one of the challenges that we face is the consolidation that's happened in the last year, which was already on track, but with the repeal of the Paramount consent decrees and the sort of the bottom dropping out where like theatrical just disappeared globally, which was the worst part for American cinema, per Naomi's earlier point, is at the other side of this, we have a greater level of consolidation than has ever existed before in the entertainment space. We also have a greater number of authoring tools and abilities to forge relationships with our audiences than have ever existed. But the idea that you use that to plug into this giant monopoly machine, and that's somehow going to get you where you want to go, I think is more different. I feel like the path from sort of making your own movies to like going mainstream, whatever that means, looks more different than it ever has before. And this is a time where you really want to look at the Issa Raes of the world and the Mark Duplass's of the world and the folks who build equity in their projects in advance by growing audiences that they own and owning as much, in Mark Duplass's case, owning as much of his content outright as possible, even the small stuff, so that when there is a big hit and somebody wants to license the whole library, there's value not just for him, but for everybody who worked on those movies. And so that's a piece that I think we have to decide also what survives the pandemic and what we will not settle for ever again. And that's in our relationships to our own films and to festivals and to distributors and how we want to reach audiences. And that's work that we will continue to have to do. Social media is not going anywhere. Algorithms aren't going anywhere. And I don't think philanthropy is a good way to try to fix economic problems. I don't think relying on the benefactors at these giant streaming platforms to somehow change their algorithms or open up their data, like, I just don't think that's going to happen. And I'm certainly not going to operate as if it is. So what can I do every day with my own work and my own career to make sure that I don't have to rely on them? It's not easy. Like, I feel like I want to go back to Sav's original point. Like, Sav is like, I worked so hard. Like, it will feel like that. And that's, I mean, if we can talk about capitalism another day, like, that's the paradigm that we're in now, right?
Yeah, I just want to +1 your point about how consolidated those traditional streams are, and they were before, but again, it is so much worse now. And to return to my point from a while ago about the 51 fund and like what are the films you can actually make money on? How early you know now if a film is going to make money or not through those traditional streams. It's not like people are submitting to Sundance and getting in by surprise. Like, let me crush some dreams here. We know at the script stage, in the post-production stage, what is going to happen to a film. And as financiers, that's great, because now we're not guessing anymore. We're told these are the films you may choose from that are going to make money. As a filmmaker, that is a catastrophe. As film festivals, as people who care about independent stories, that is a catastrophe. So if your film has not been chosen on one of these very narrow and few elevators at the script stage, by the time you go into production, don't waste your time. It's not happening. But to Emily's point, there's this whole other possibility, because it's not like that system is functioning perfectly either. It's not functioning, and it's falling apart all the time. So we have this opportunity to build other models and build and reimagine how this works and actually build a functioning system that also is just kinder and more inclusive and less toxic than what exists. Like, we can just build something else.
Y'all are making me want to make a film festival with y'all or something. I don't know. Let's do it.
Well, yeah. But not just film festivals, like the whole thing, like financing, production. This is what we're doing in this incubator, is looking at, like, can we just reimagine a whole different ecosystem that is not like what we have?
Well, I'll apply.
Great.
Say it. Say the thing. I want to hear it. I think we got to go all the way there.
And also that at this pivot point, we have to make real decisions very intentionally about what that other thing is going to be, right? It's not just how do I get to make my movie? It's what are the values that I care about in a media ecosystem? And what are the micro decisions that I'm going to make in my projects that are going to contribute to those outcomes? Because again, the system we have is just toxic. It's not just about inclusivity, although that is very horrible and real, but it's just awful. Like, people are mean to each other. Like, they exploit each other. They commit human rights violations. Like, how can we make micro decisions that are going to add up to a media ecosystem that is healthy and kind and better?
And I think a lot of that, Naomi, also starts like at an organizational level too, right? So one of the things we've been talking about a lot within Film Festival Alliance, we had a big conference in January called FilmX. And one of the things we talked a lot was humane resources. And like independent filmmaking and running an independent film festival have a lot in common. They're both very scrappy, entrepreneurial things where you end up wearing a ton of hats and doing way too much work in a non-equitable manner. And so, you know, if we're just taking a step back, a lot of festivals that are small don't have HR departments and don't have like, you know, resources to and it's always just kind of like, well, this is the way we've always done it. So we've always just worked, 80 hours a week, and we've always just done this. It's time to take a step back at every level in this industry and think about doing things more equitably. And so I totally agree with everything you're saying. And that's kind of where I'm saying, like, we're on the precipice of like big change, is that like, it's not just like in the distribution side, but it has to start at the bottom for organizations too. And that includes film festivals as well. But one of the things that we did this year last year at Film Festival Alliance, we started was a program called Film Festival Day. And it was something we'd always wanted to do, but just hadn't been able to get it together because it would have been hard to ask everyone to get a brick and mortar at the same time. And that cost money too. But in a virtual world, it was much easier to like reach out to our membership and say, hey, would you be interested in all showing this film on the same weekend? We'll do a live Q&A. And you can, it gives you content for your audience, and it supports the filmmaker. We used a platform called Theatrical at Home, which was built by filmmakers. It wasn't successful like to the nth degree like it was for one specific film, which was like a short doc. It was like 60 minutes. So it would have been really hard to program in a virtual, like in a physical, like in-person festival. But it was perfect for the virtual world. So again, like think about, just back to an idea about like timing of like short films that are longer films may work better in the virtual world than they do in the physical programming world in person. But anyway, so 60-minute film plus a 60-minute conversation was basically, the time slot for a feature film. And I think with this particular film that we did in the summer, it was about synchronized ice skating. And this filmmaker had done an amazing job of building up like community support within that synchronized ice skating world. So she had a huge audience waiting to see the movie. It screened at like 37 festivals, or 37 festivals screened it. So not only did she make relationships with 37 festival programmers, across the country, she was able to find out where her film played best. Like it played in Ann Arbor really well, it played in San Luis Obispo really well, it played in Woods Hole really well. She got all the data from everyone who bought a ticket for her film. And she literally got 50-50 of the box office. She didn't have a distributor taking out any fees for her. There was literally just like maybe a small platform fee. And I think I'll have to look up the link, but I think she made like somewhere around $17,000, $18,000 just for, this sort of collaboration. So when we're talking about doing things differently and like the power of collaboration and the power of coming together and building audiences, this is just a small example of something that I think like we can start thinking in these different directions. Think about how do we partner with like brands or other mission aligned organizations who have the audiences. I think there's a lot of outside of sort of the norm thinking that we can be doing.
I want to just prop up Leela and how she's living the ethics of the kind of media ecosystem that I would like to be part of, because she has the power, right? In some way. So she has run film festivals. She runs a Film Festival Alliance. Film festivals could just say, well, we're going to keep all the money and we're not going to give you email lists. And a lot of them do. And Leela's saying, well, I could do that, but I care about the ethics of what this is. And I am, even though I don't have to, I'm going to do these things. And I'm so inspired by you and all that you're doing. And I just encourage all of us to think in that way. Like, it's not just the people without power who need to change. It's especially the people with power who can help drive the change.
I would argue that Leela and Sav and Katie are actively pressuring their peers to also adopt this. And I think that's kind of what that's the work that all of us have to do, right? Like if you look at the history of economics and labor and value transactions in America, the only tool we have against monopolies is collective bargaining. And now you're going to take a bunch of people who consider themselves independent filmmakers, right? Many of us do not belong to a union that is collective bargaining with expertise on our behalf, for example. And you're going to try to get them to all agree to a certain set of standards of what we will demand from a festival that screens our work and how we will cooperate with a festival that screens our work, what we will demand from a distributor and how we can provide value to a distributor, what we will demand from platforms or people buying and licensing our work, what work we are willing to do for free and what work we're not willing to do for free. Because the system has thus far relied on and profited from there always being someone more desperate than you to do the thing that they're asking you to do. And it's like good enough, right? So even being really special isn't necessarily going to get you anywhere, right? It's actually a certain kind of core ethics that will be able to move us forward. And that really requires all of us. And I think that's why this group got together. And I just want to honor Anna for her own vision and how she's like, you could get a very different 90-minute film school, y'all. We could be talking about how to get a studio deal right now, but that is not what we're doing, because that's actually something that just ends up being available to so few people, and typically is only available after you've done all the work we're talking about anyway, right? Or you could just be born into a legendary family, in which case you get born into doing studio deals. Good for you, like great, but like I wouldn't want to do that anyway. But I think that's actually really important to think about here, is what is the pressure that you're applying? And you could apply that to your anti-racism work, right? You can apply that to like all of the equity work that you're doing, not just on behalf of yourself, but also on behalf of people who don't look like you and think like you necessarily. And I don't really see another way forward other than that kind of community activist work. Like Leela is not only building her own systems ethically, she's building systems so that others can also build systems ethically. And that's, that's a lot. And not everybody is a Leela. Would that we were all, but not everybody's a Leela. So we can support the Leelas around us, right? If you are not able to wrap your mind around all this community organizing, in addition to all the work you have to do, that's okay. Literally, everybody's got something to contribute here. And so it's thinking about where you can get involved and what does feel good to you.
And also about like, everybody may not be Leela and have these like bigger spheres of system responsibility, but you're making decisions every day in how you hire people and how you deal with people. Like those decisions are the little decisions that make up the systems. So like write out a code of ethics for yourself. I write out the dream of what you want the media ecosystem to be in 10 years. And how can your decisions today be part of shaping that? Because then other people will see you doing that and you'll be like, my God, you don't have to be on set for 16 hours a day. You can and then they might change their behavior. This is how change happens. It's not only the organizing level.
I think it's also as well knowing that you can hold people accountable. I think people are very quick to shy away from pointing something out when they know something is not right. I'm obviously speaking from a strategist perspective. So when we're advising or looking after approximately 160 odd films, and we are very protective over those filmmakers and those works, because there's a lot of scammy festivals out there. There's a lot of people trying to kind of hijack content and use it for their own benefit. And when you are a filmmaker in this ecosystem of, I need to get those stamps of approval, I need those laurels, and I'm going to settle for something less because I need it to prove I'm a filmmaker, you kind of get wrapped up in this world of not really realizing that sometimes you're harming your work or your career. And I'm known in the industry. I'm a bit of a Rottweiler if I know that a festival is not doing something right, and I will call them out on it. But I'm not publicly saying that on a platform. I'm not kind of posting on socials. I'm emailing them and I'm saying, let's discuss this, because I think what you're doing is a misstep. It's not saying I don't think what you're doing is correct. It's saying actually, it's about realizing that there's an ecosystem that you're part of, and when you start making a misstep, sometimes it filters into other festivals thinking that's okay. And I think last year threw up a whole load of situations that we have never had to deal with. I've done this 16 years. I've never had to deal with a pandemic, but I've also never had to deal with the behavior from some festivals that threw up because of this pandemic. And some of it was just simple good manners. And and it was sad that some festivals I had to kind of haul over the coals and kind of say, look, why are you doing this? Like, if this was not a pandemic going on, this is atrocious behavior. And the majority of them came back, and it was an engagement, it was a conversation, and it's because they were freaking out. They didn't know, they hadn't had to deal with this before. It's fine. And I think people have to realize that if you don't think something's being done right, and this is from a festival perspective, like filmmaker to festival, that you engage in that. And it doesn't have to be combative. It doesn't have to be didactic. It has to be a, why did you do this? Is there a reason? And it might be that there is a reason. And I think some of the festivals that initially their responses to the pandemic situation were just absolutely abhorrent, actually turned around. They actually kind of turned around. And that was after I had to kind of say, look, we're 7 months into this. This is what other festivals have done. Like, what you're proposing is just not on. And it's easier for me to do that on behalf of filmmakers that we look after, because if you left it to a filmmaker, it can have that kind of passive aggressive tone to it, and filmmakers can get accidentally labeled as, you know, that kind of microaggression. It's like, no, they're just trying to look out for their work, and also they submitted to your festival. So, you know, you've got to remember that. I think people should always call that out, but in a way that is inviting of conversation.
Thank you. I'm like encouraged and daunted, which is, I think, maybe how we all feel after, apart from exhausted, how we all feel after 2020 is like, there really is kind of political will or social will to move things in a different direction. Folks like us are getting given these kinds of platforms to talk instead of just sort of repeating the old systems. We have just like 30 seconds each left. Leela, I wonder if you wanted to share anything else with this crowd about, most importantly, where they can find you, but kind of final thoughts here.
Oh, sorry. I think that they put my email in the chat, so you can find me at leela@filmfestivalalliance.org. But I am so honored to be in the company of all of you, and I've worked with, as I mentioned, worked with all of you in different capacities, and I just think that, again, like through collaboration, communication, transparency is a huge thing. And I love what Katie said about, like, you know, speak up, you know, this is the way we're going to make things change, and we're going to do it together. And everybody on this call, you know, there are ways for all of you to get involved in this conversation, so do it.
Sav?
Had to unmute. Final parting thoughts. If there are any questions that were not answered that you would like for me to answer, please feel free to reach out to me, savrogers.com/contact, so I don't give out my private Gmail to the whole internet, and I can change that anytime. Thank you. I am grateful for the opportunity to talk to people today. I'm happy to talk about, you know, just as somebody who's in the position of, I think a lot of people in the audience, as a young filmmaker just trying to find his path. I'm happy to share any wisdom that I've learned from other people like Leela, who has been an incredible collaborator and mentor throughout the however long we've known each other now. And I'm just, you know, thankful that I got to speak on this panel. But I don't know, if I could figure out how to make a nonprofit and try to advocate for things that I felt were injustices, I feel like anybody else can figure that out too. You may not be on this panel, but you can find ways to subvert or surprise people in your own way and fight for real change.
Thank you. Naomi?
I'm also very grateful to be in this company and on this panel, and to all of you listening. I would, if you want to find me, my website's naomimcdougalljones.com, and I'm going to again plug our incubator because it's so directly at the heart of everything we're talking about. It's called Constellation Incubator. Applications are open now through April 15th. And I really do think it's going to be a paradigm shifting summer that we're going to spend together. So I hope you come join us.
Thank you. And Katie?
Again, I reiterate what everyone said. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this. And my final parting thoughts would be what I always say to every filmmaker, which is, don't forget there's a whole worldwide circuit out there when it comes to festivals, and finding your audience is not always necessarily the easiest or direct thing to do. But just remember there are so many festivals out there, and to do your research. That's the one thing. Oh, and if you want to find me, festivalformula.com, also Festival Formula on any kind of social platforms. I will say it's a really interesting resource in terms of we do shout out any clients we take on, any talks we're doing, including the Filmmaker Lounge Digital Bootcamp, but also that we do mention any selection that our clients get into, and that can be a really nice array of festivals, some that you might have heard of and some that you haven't.
Thank you so much. And thank you all so much. I also feel really honored to have been included in this talk and to have a platform to talk about our radical reimagining of the future. Something that Katie said that we've been thinking about a lot internally at Seed&Spark is accountability. And I think my sort of synopsis of what Katie said that I think is so important is that we are all accountable for what we build, and we can be part of the system that holds others accountable for what they build, to ensure that it is equitable and to ensure that it is fostering the kind of future that we really want to. And we can do that by leading by example as well, and building systems internally that people can model and replicate. This has all been incredibly exciting. It was an honor for being the founder of Seed&Spark to get to host this conversation on our Seed&Spark channel. This will be available in perpetuity on our YouTube channel, so you can check back in if there are gems of wisdom you would like to review, tell your friends. And thank you so much, everyone, for your participation and time who joined us today. It was very fun in the chat as well. And we will see y'all in the future.